The Old West didn't just create legends. It collected the broken, the brilliant, and the restless, shaping them into the figures we still talk about today. And few arrived on its frontier more haunted, more gifted, or more complicated than John Henry "Doc" Holliday. In our last episode, we walked the red clay roads of Georgia, tracing the rise of a promising young dentist whose life was already shadowed by loss. But by 1873, the world around him began to collapse. Family tragedies, professional upheaval, whispers of illness, and a deep, private heartbreak that no one living can fully explain. Georgia was tightening around him like a noose, and the choices before him grew darker by the day. This is the moment when John Henry Holliday stopped being a Southern gentleman with a future and became a fugitive chasing one. In this episode, we follow him through the final months in Georgia, through grief, suspicion, and a violent incident along the Withlacoochee River that may have forced his hand. We watch him slip away from the life he was raised for, cross the Gulf Coast, and step into Texas just as Dallas was exploding into a raw, unruly frontier city. Here, the young dentist tried to cling to respectability, but the saloons, the faro tables, and the rough men who lived by their wits began to pull him into a different world. This is the story of a man running from sickness, from scandal, from sorrow, and the West that caught him, reshaped him, and set him on the long, dangerous road toward Dodge City, Tombstone, and immortality. Welcome to Chronicles of the Old West. This is episode 2 in our series, Lungslinger, the Doc Holliday Odyssey.
In the shadowed annals of the Old West, few figures burn as brightly or as tragically as John Henry "Doc" Holliday. Last time we walked the red clay roads of his Georgia youth, the loving yet haunted home in Valdosta, the loss of his mother to the White Plague, the privileged yet restless education that forged a dentist with a gambler's soul. But by 1873, the young doctor stood at a crossroads where dreams crumbled and the past refused to release his grip. This is the story of how Georgia lost John Henry Holliday and how the West gained Doc. The winter of 1872 to 1873 wrapped Atlanta and Griffin in a chill that went deeper than the wind off the Georgia pines. For John Henry Holliday, freshly minted from the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery, the world still held the shape of promise. He had returned south with steady hands, sharp mind, and the credentials of a professional man. His brief association with Dr. Arthur C. Ford seemed a solid foundation. Ford, however, was not a well man. On January 4, 1873, the older dentist publicly announced his departure for Florida's recuperative climate, citing impaired health from too close application to my profession. He placed his practice in the hands of Dr. J. Cooley, a capable stand-in. Ford would rally sufficiently to be elected president of the Georgia State Dental Society that year, yet consumption, the White Plague, had already marked him. He would eventually seek final treatment in Palatka, Florida, and die there in 1882. For young John Henry, the partnership's end came swiftly. He moved on, perhaps stepping out from under the protective roof of his uncle John Stiles Holliday. On December 21, 1872, hotel registers placed him at the National Hotel in Atlanta. Christmas that year carried no joy. The Griffin News reported the death of Robert Holliday, Mattie's father, longtime baggage master on the Macon and Western Railroad, who succumbed on Christmas Eve after years of disability and poverty. The family converged in grief. Mattie later recalled the wreckage with heartbreaking clarity. Everything gone but one house in Jonesboro, a large, helpless family, health wrecked. Her father had been received into the Catholic Church at the end and was buried in the Catholic plot in Fayetteville. John Henry stood with them, comforting Mattie, her sisters, and brother James Robert Jim Bob Holliday. The Hollidays were a close-knit clan, bound by blood, shared hardship, and the stubborn Southern loyalty that had carried them through war and Reconstruction. Within that tight circle, Mattie held a singular, tender place in John Henry's affections, a quiet, profound connection that went beyond ordinary cousinly fondness. It was a bond forged in childhood, strengthened by mutual understanding, and one that would endure across vast distances, darkening years and the wild currents of his later life. Whether it was romantic love, deep friendship, or something layered between the two, it remained a steady emotional anchor even as the world around him unraveled. Sorrow continued to compound with merciless speed. On January 13, 1873, Francisco Hidalgo, another man tied closely to the family's social and personal circle, succumbed to consumption on his farm near Jenkinsburg. He left behind a young widow and children, a fresh reminder of the White Plague's cruel reach. The disease had already claimed John Henry's mother, and now seemed to stalk the edges of his world like an insistent shadow. The very next day, January 14th, John Henry took decisive action. He sold his half-interest in the Iron Front building in Griffin to N.G. Phillips for $1,800, a surprisingly large sum for the time and place. That transaction carried heavy significance. It was not merely a routine piece of business. The swiftness, coming immediately on the heels of Hidalgo's death, suggested a man settling accounts, liquidating assets, and closing chapters. The substantial payment gave him ready cash and mobility at a moment when his future in Georgia suddenly felt uncertain. Whether driven by grief, a growing awareness of his own health, personal entanglements, or the accumulating weight of family losses, John Henry appeared to be preparing for departure. The sale marked a quiet but unmistakable turning point. The promising young dentist was beginning to untether himself from the life he had known. Griffin itself shimmered with post-war energy. The town boasted 15 practicing attorneys, a dozen physicians, 50 stores, 12 bar rooms, 9 churches, and a major rail station. Griffin is now the healthiest place in Georgia, the local paper declared with boosterish pride. It claimed to be the best policed city in the state. With 3 colleges and only 1 established dentist, R.A. McDonald, described as one of the cleverest tooth carpenters. Opportunities seemed ripe. Local tradition insists John Henry took a corner office upstairs in the McKee half of the Iron Front building and hung out his shingle. The room still bears faint traces of dental practice. Yet the town had its shadows. Gambling dens as common as pig tracks in the snow. The paper debated legalizing and taxing them. For a young man with a reckless streak and a fondness for cards, these holes offered private indulgence away from prying eyes. Courting possibilities abounded at the Central College for young women. Atlanta still exerted a powerful pull on the young dentist. There, John Henry renewed his acquaintance with Lee Smith, the celebrated mixologist at the Maison de Ville. Like Holliday, Smith was a Griffin native who had known the family for years. At 28, he had already lived a fast, colorful life, bartending in Atlanta during the war, honing his craft for several years at the famed St. Charles Hotel in New Orleans, then returning to open and operate his own saloons. Smith was no stranger to trouble. He had been arrested for keeping a gaming table, specifically a faro bank, and later for assault with intent to murder, only to be acquitted both times. Yet by 1873, he was skillfully balancing legitimate investments with his saloon interests including the girl of the period saloon and later the big bonanza. Through it all, Faro remained central to his world. That quintessential gambler's game, with its distinctive cloth layout, card box, and even money payouts, thrived in the sporting scene of the day. It gave birth to enduring expressions such as bucking the tiger and both ends against the middle. For John Henry, who would one day make his living dealing faro across the West, Smith's tables offered both friendship and the perfect place to sharpen his own instincts at the game. Meanwhile, closer to home, conversations with his cousin Robert "Hub" Holliday pointed toward a more stable and respectable future. Hub planned to enroll at the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery in the fall of 1873, with John Henry agreeing to serve as his preceptor. The two cousins envisioned a long and successful partnership once Hub graduated. John Henry's willingness to take on that mentoring role signaled a clear intention to put down roots and remain in Georgia. Yet something dramatic was already stirring beneath the surface, something that would soon shatter those plans entirely. The Valdosta Times, looking back in 1882, offered the gentlest and most forgiving explanation. John Henry, the paper said, possessed a roving and reckless turn of mind, and like a great many of our Southern boys of similar nature, he soon sought his fortune out west. A far more enduring theory, however, centers on a diagnosis of tuberculosis, the same wasting disease that had already claimed his mother. He had watched her slowly consumed by it. He had stood at Francisco Hidalgo's graveside. He had witnessed Dr. Ford's steady decline firsthand. The early symptoms were all too familiar: a persistent dry cough, sore throat, chest pains, and labored breathing. In an era before medical science could reliably identify the tubercle bacillus under a microscope, and when even the stethoscope played only a minor role, diagnosis remained more ominous suspicion than scientific certainty. Doctors often defaulted to the conclusion that any lingering symptoms unresponsive to purgatives and emetics must be consumption. Treatment offered little real hope. Patients were prescribed a bland diet, regular exercise, and, most importantly, relocation to a mild, genial, uniform, and salubrious climate. The average life expectancy after diagnosis stretched between 15 and 25 years. Many consumptives still managed to marry, raise families, and build careers before the disease finally overwhelmed them. In the popular imagination of the time, consumption even carried a perverse romanticism. It was called the muse of literature, believed to inspire a kind of melancholy creativity and spiritual refinement. Southern options abounded and competed with the growing popularity of the Western cure. Ponce de Leon Springs near Atlanta, Indian Springs, known as the Saratoga of the South, and the mineral waters of Hamilton County, Florida, near his McKee relatives, all offered hope without requiring a drastic uprooting. Dallas, Texas, by contrast, shared a climate similar to Georgia's and had only recently emerged from yellow fever quarantines. A tuberculosis diagnosis, while terrifying, does not fully account for the suddenness of John Henry's departure, the abrupt abandonment of his promising dental practice, the broken plans with his cousin Hub, and the clean break from the respectable future that lay within reach in Georgia. Something deeper and more personal appeared to be roiling beneath the surface. The bond between John Henry and his cousin Mattie Holliday was undeniably profound. Later generations of the family tended to downplay any romantic element, insisting it was merely a close friendship. They may have done so to protect Mattie's revered image as the saintly, self-sacrificing nun who would later inspire the character of Melanie Wilkes in Gone with the Wind. Yet the circumstantial evidence is compelling. The two corresponded regularly throughout his years in the West, and Mattie kept his letters for the rest of her life. John Henry's increasing heavy drinking and moral decline by the standards of the day, align with the pattern of frustrated love. Mattie never married and eventually entered religious life shortly after he gained notoriety as Doc Holliday. His own health reportedly worsened after she took her vows. First-cousin marriages were not uncommon in the Holliday family, but Mattie's devout Catholicism made such a union impossible under canon law. Some branches of the family whispered of a more scandalous possibility, that John Henry had fathered an illegitimate child who was quietly placed for adoption. Such an event could have created unbearable tensions capable of driving a young man away while steering a young woman toward the convent. Whatever the truth, the letters that might have clarified matters are gone forever. Mattie destroyed some herself before her death, and the rest were burned by family members afterward. Whatever the precise catalyst, the spring or summer of 1873 brought a final farewell. At the Atlanta train station, the Holliday family gathered on the platform. Amid the hiss of steam and the clamor of departing trains, Uncle John Stiles pressed a diamond stick-pin into his nephew's hand, a quiet, personal token of affection and parting. Family lore would later describe a prearranged plan. John Henry was supposedly heading to Texas for his health, where he would convalesce and work with Dr. John A. Segar, a Georgia acquaintance. In reality, his path likely turned south first, back toward Valdosta. His ties to the McKee side of the family ran deep, perhaps even deeper than some of his Holliday connections. He may have stopped to test the reputed curative powers of the springs in Hamilton County near his uncle, Dr. James Taylor McKee. Or he may have spent time roaming the familiar lands of his uncle Tom Sylvester McKee between the Little and Withlacoochee Rivers. There, in the boyhood terrain near the Lowndes-Brooks County line, echoes of earlier carefree explorations on his father's Cat Creek land must have stirred. Tensions with his father, now mayor of Valdosta, had never fully healed, but he found comfort in the company of Uncle Tom and old friends such as Dr. Lucian F. Frink. It was along the Withlacoochee River, according to persistent local tradition, that the final shattering event occurred. Bat Masterson, who had years to hear Holliday speak of his youth, later recounted the story in vivid detail. For some time, young white and black boys had shared a popular swimming hole on the river. Then the white boys decided to claim it exclusively. When the black boys refused to yield and defiantly told them to find another spot if they didn't like it, tensions boiled over. One beautiful Sunday afternoon, with a large group swimming at the disputed spot, John Henry Holliday appeared on the riverbank armed with a double-barreled shotgun. He ordered the swimmers out of the water. As they stampeded toward the opposite shore, he waited until several were clustered together, then fired both barrels, killing 2 outright and wounding several others. According to Masterson, Holliday later justified the act by saying they had to be disciplined. His family, recognizing the gravity of the situation, urged him to leave the area. Other accounts painted slightly different pictures. A man named Mr. Moore, who worked in Valdosta in 1881, recalled a version involving a pistol and either an accidental or deliberate shooting of one or more black boys. Tradition within the Martin family, relatives of Major Holliday's second wife, spoke of an argument that ended with Doc killing one of the black youths. By the 1930s, when interest in Holliday revived, the family offered a more sanitized telling. Holliday and his friends had cleared the swimming hole, grew enraged when black swimmers muddied the water and fired shots over their heads to scare them off. In that version, a buggy whip confrontation escalated when one man returned fire with birdshot, prompting Holliday to pursue with his pistol, though he never caught the offender. No contemporary newspaper reports or court records of the incident have survived. The Valdosta papers from 1873 are incomplete. and Lowndes County criminal records from the period were lost. Moreover, white violence against blacks during Reconstruction frequently went unreported in the press. Even so, the converging details, Masterson's account, his specific knowledge that Holliday went to Dallas, and multiple family traditions make the episode compelling. In the tense racial climate of Reconstruction-era Georgia, such an event would have carried severe, possibly deadly, consequences. John Henry slipped away. He may have paused one last time in Hamilton County to bid his McKee relatives goodbye and gather what he needed for the journey. Then came rail or steamer, possibly from Pensacola bound for Galveston or overland routes. One family story claims that as he fled Tom McKee's home, he carried with him the hell bitch, a heavy double-edged knife Tom had forged from a meat cleaver during the Civil War. He left the sheath behind. Galveston greeted him as a city on the move. As Texas's primary Gulf port, it hummed with ambition. Its grand new opera house only a few years old, and a cotton exchange established just the year before. Echoes of its swashbuckling past, when Jean Lafitte and his pirates had once ruled the island, still lingered in local lore. John Henry did not linger. He passed through swiftly, staying one step ahead of an approaching yellow fever closure that would soon quarantine the port. From Galveston, the Houston and Texas Central Railroad carried him inland through landscapes that tugged at his heart. Piney woods gave way to post oaks and familiar cotton fields, stirring sharp pangs of homesickness for the Georgia he had left behind. He made a brief stop in Brenham to visit his uncle, Jonathan Laval McKee. Jonathan had left Georgia in 1858 and built a prosperous life in Texas, only for war and Reconstruction to strip away much of what he had gained. They shared news of family back home, but the visit was short. Dallas lay ahead. Dallas in 1873 was a town in the throes of raw, chaotic transformation, still barely more than a frontier settlement, yet exploding into a city. The railroad had arrived the previous year, driving the population from roughly 1,200 to more than 7,000 in a single year. Muddy streets teemed with construction noise and confusion. Free-roaming hogs served as the town's peculiar sanitation crew, rooting through cattle waste. It had only recently emerged from a yellow fever quarantine, and the looming panic of 1873 would soon put a brake on its rapid growth. Still, Dallas functioned as a vital supply hub for points farther west, with buffalo and cattle hides promising new waves of prosperity. Beyond the respectable business district, the town revealed its wilder face. Along Main Street, past the train depot, stretched more than 40 saloons and gambling halls, catering to a restless, floating population of gamblers, prostitutes, and frontier opportunists. This was the rough, unfinished world John Henry was entering. Connections, as always, mattered. He knew people here. The family of H.P. Morris, whose daughter Miriam had attended the Valdosta Institute with him, had relocated to Dallas. More importantly, a prominent local dentist offered a professional lifeline. Dr. John A. Segar was a fellow Georgian, a Confederate veteran, and a graduate of the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery. His father had once operated a respectable traveler's inn on the post road near Holliday family holdings before the war. Segar had settled in Dallas in 1867 and built a thriving practice. Family ties and shared alma mater aligned perfectly. Segar had even advertised years earlier for a promising young graduate to join him. By the summer of 1873, the two men formed a partnership in the Philadelphia dental office. For a time, respectability still held sway. In October 1873, Holliday and Segar enjoyed a notable triumph at the state fair, sweeping the top prizes for the best set of gold teeth, the best set in vulcanized rubber, and the finest overall display of artificial teeth and dental wear. John Henry also made public gestures toward moral uprightness. He claimed membership in the Methodist Church and joined a temperance society. These steps were likely calculated to please his straight-laced Baptist partner and reassure family back in Georgia. Yet the city's nightlife exerted an ever stronger gravitational pull. Fort Worth, a short distance west, offered a measure of anonymity for drinking and gambling away from Dallas eyes. If consumption had already taken root, whiskey provided a ready excuse as well as relief, dulling both the physical cough and the mental ghosts of loss. The card tables offered something more: profit, excitement, and a powerful distraction. Faro, Monte, and five-card draw, the games he had first encountered in Georgia, now deepened into serious skill. John Henry proved an apt and quick student. The respectable facade soon cracked. On March 2nd, 1874, the partnership of Seagar and Holliday dissolved upon mutual consent. Holliday moved his office above the Dallas County Bank at the corner of Main and Lamar Streets and took personal responsibility for the firm's outstanding debts. The split was clearly not amicable. Trouble followed quickly. In April, he was arrested for operating a Keno game. May brought a formal gambling indictment and a court appearance. He paid his property and poll taxes in June, but that same month, Seagar's office was destroyed by fire. With prospects in Dallas dimming, another end-of-track town beckoned. Denison, located just south of the Red River on the edge of Indian Territory. Rougher and wilder than Dallas, Denison was a cattle shipping hub with a new refrigerated packing plant. Law enforcement there rested in the hands of Deputy Sheriff Jesse Lee Red Hall, a tough, courageous former schoolteacher and town marshal who kept a firm but pragmatic grip on Skiddy Street's Vice District. Hall generally tolerated gambling and liquor sales as long as they remained orderly. Dental competition in Denison was already sufficient, so Holliday increasingly favored the sporting life over the dental chair. When the packing plant fell victim to the panic of 1873 and closed, the local economy suffered, but he continued shuttling between Dallas and Denison through the fall and winter. The slide into frontier violence became public on December 26, 1873. Seeking to break the monotony of the holiday season, John Henry Holliday exchanged gunfire with Charles W. Champagne Charlie Austin, a popular and flamboyant saloon keeper at the St. Charles Saloon. The Dallas Weekly Herald dryly noted that the pair relieved the monotony of the noise of firecrackers by taking a couple of shots at each other. No one was seriously injured, but both men were arrested. Austin was a local character, a former Texas cowhand turned rollicking bartender with a colorful reputation. He had been arrested the previous year for assault with intent to murder after attacking Dallas's ex-marshal, though he had been acquitted. With more friends and influence in town, Austin was released quickly. Holliday, however, faced far more serious consequences. On January 18, 1874, he was charged with assault with intent to murder. He stood trial just 1 week later on January 25th and was acquitted. Though the shootout itself was relatively minor, the incident marked a public turning point. It was one of the first times John Henry Holliday made headlines for gunplay in Texas, and it helped cement his growing reputation as a man who would not back down from a confrontation. In April 1874, he finally paid the lingering fine from his earlier Keno gambling arrest, clearing his legal slate for the moment. By May 1875, Holliday had left the Dallas-Denison area and headed west by stagecoach along the military roads. He may have made a brief stop at Jacksboro, near Fort Richardson, then continued past Fort Belknap, traveling southwest to Fort Griffin. Fort Griffin was a U.S. Army post on a plateau overlooking the Clear Fork of the Brazos River. After the Red River War in 1874, in which the Army defeated the Comanche and Kiowa, the fort shifted to mop-up operations and maintaining order. It housed troops from the 10th Cavalry, Buffalo Soldiers, and the 11th Infantry. Below the military post lay the Flat, a rough civilian settlement that curled along Griffin Avenue toward the river. It was notorious. One old-timer called it the toughest place I'd ever seen, filled with saloons, dance halls, and the prominent Beehive Saloon. Prostitutes lived in small shanties along the riverbank. Although the military had temporarily suppressed the worst elements in 1874, vice roared back once buffalo hunters, trail cowboys, soldiers, and gamblers flooded in. The atmosphere was raw and chaotic. Stacks of buffalo hides, ox teams camped along the creek, and constant noise, pianos, fiddles, guitars, whoops, curses, and raucous laughter. Money flowed freely. Men drank, gambled, quarreled, and sometimes killed each other, over a quarter suspiciously taken in a poker game or because of some trivial insult. Doc quickly integrated into this world. He spent much of his time at the Beehive Saloon and John Shaughnessy's place. One of the most colorful and dangerous figures he met was Hurricane Bill Martin, a notorious horse thief and scout. Martin was so slick he once worked as an Army scout while still a fugitive. He had been forced by a vigilance committee to marry his common-law wife and fellow prostitute, Hurricane Minnie, but the Union did little to change their behavior. Doc witnessed the absurdity of frontier life. In one memorable quarrel, Hurricane Bill and a buffalo hunter named Mike O'Brien, both unarmed at the time, ran for their guns. O'Brien returned with a powerful buffalo gun and blasted holes through Bill's shack while Bill crouched inside returning fire. Once O'Brien ran out of ammunition, he simply went back to the Beehive for another drink. Later, both men sobered up and forgot the entire feud. Such wild episodes were common. Poker and faro tables were where Doc and Hurricane Bill truly bonded. In June 1875, the newly organized Shackelford County held its first district court session under Judge J.P. Osterhout. 37 cases were heard in just 5 days. Gambling and illegal liquor sales were common offenses, with typical fines of $10 to $15. Doc Holliday was among those charged, along with Hurricane Bill, Mike Lynch, and a man known only as Curly, possibly the future outlaw Curly Bill Brocious. They were fined for playing cards in a house where spirituous liquors were sold. Rather than pay the fine, Doc and Lynch chose to flee. An arrest warrant was issued and sent to the sheriff of Tom Green County, San Angelo area. This marked the beginning of Doc's pattern of staying one step ahead of the law. Doc's movements for the rest of 1875 and early 1876 are poorly documented. There are legends of him participating in the Black Hills gold rush and spending time in Deadwood. Kate Elder, Big Nose Kate, claimed she and Doc spent the winter of 1875 to 76 together at Cantonment Sweetwater, later Mobeetie, Texas, and that they were present when Bat Masterson killed Corporal Melvin King on January 24, 1876. However, Masterson always said he first met Doc later in Dodge City, and Kate's timeline is notoriously unreliable due to her tangled past, including an affair with Silas Melvin, name changes from Fisher to Elder, and prostitution arrests in Wichita alongside women connected to the Earps. On the night of March 3, 1876, Private Jacob Smith, a black soldier absent without leave, was shot and killed in the Flat. This may have been the incident Bat Masterson later referred to when he said Doc killed a black soldier at Jacksboro. Whether or not Doc was responsible, he fled soon afterward using the alias Tom McKee, after his favorite uncle, Tom Sylvester McKee. He likely headed east to catch the railroad, traveling north through Denison and Indian Territory into Missouri, possibly stopping in St. Louis. From there, the Black Hills gold rush and general westward momentum pulled him toward Cheyenne and briefly Deadwood. By after the July 4th, 1876, centennial celebrations and news of Custer's defeat at Little Bighorn, he was in Denver. He dealt cards at Bab's Variety House and lived in a room above Long John's saloon on Blake Street, still using the alias T.S. McKee. While in Denver, family lore claims Pinkerton agents visited the Holliday home in Atlanta asking for photographs of John Henry. One of the girls allegedly hid his picture. There is also a legend of a brutal knife fight with gambler Bud Ryan in November 1876, in which Doc nearly severed Ryan's head, possibly with the hell-bitch knife. A lighter Holliday Street affair resulted in only a small fine. Undelivered letters addressed to T.S. McKee at the post office suggest he was still using that alias. By January 1877, Doc returned to Dallas, this time using his real name instead of an alias. He had been drifting through Colorado, Wyoming, and possibly other points for roughly a year. Upon his return, he immediately resumed his gambling activities and quickly ran into legal trouble again, facing multiple gambling arrests. By this stage in his life, Doc had visibly hardened. Physically, he was described as tall and slim, already showing the effects of tuberculosis, the consumption. He drank heavily, which likely served both as a painkiller for his worsening cough and as a way to dull the emotional weight of his past. His personality had become unpredictable. He could still be genteel, charming, and well-mannered one moment, a remnant of his Southern upbringing and professional training, but sour, surly, and quick to violence the next. He was now routinely armed with a villainous-looking knife, possibly the hell bitch he had taken from his Uncle Tom, and a .41 caliber double-barreled derringer that he kept in his vest pocket for quick access. This combination of charm and menace would become central to his reputation. The most serious episode during this period occurred on Independence Day, July 4th, 1877, in the new town of Breckenridge, Stevens County, Texas. Doc got into a violent argument with a man named Henry Kahn, who was related to a prominent Dallas family of clothiers. Reviving an old Southern tradition, Holliday severely caned, beat with a walking cane, Henry Kahn during the initial confrontation. Police intervened and both men were hauled into court and fined. Later the same day, the two men encountered each other again. This time, Kahn shot Holliday, seriously wounding him. The cause of the original dispute was never clearly recorded, but Kahn himself appears to have been a shady character. He was later indicted in Shackelford County for forgery and slipped away from Texas justice. Newspapers initially reported that Doc Holliday had been killed. The Dallas Daily Herald carried word that a young man named Doc Holliday, well known in this city, was shot and killed at Breckenridge last Wednesday by a young man named Kahn. These reports, however, proved premature. Doc survived the shooting, though his recovery was slow and painful. News of the shooting reached the Holliday family back in Georgia. They sent George Henry Holliday, one of John Henry's cousins, to Texas. George's mission was twofold: to nurse Doc back to health and to try to persuade him to return home to Georgia and leave the dangerous frontier life behind. George stayed with Doc for a short time, but it soon became clear that John Henry had no intention of going back. He had fully committed to the life of a professional gambler and sporting man. After George left, Doc continued his recovery on his own. Even while recovering, Doc could not stay away from gambling. In September 1877, he was arrested again in Dallas on gambling charges. Shortly afterward, he decided to return once more to Fort Griffin. The town had changed significantly since his earlier visit. It had become a major stopping point for northward cattle drives, with huge herds, as many as 150,000 head, grazing the surrounding plains. The town was booming again, full of cowboys, gamblers, and opportunists. This environment suited Doc's current lifestyle perfectly. That spring of 1877, a striking and mysterious woman arrived who quickly became a local legend. Lottie Dino, born Charlotte Tompkins. Known as the Poker Queen, she was well-mannered, intelligent, and strikingly attractive. She took an interest in the Gus Saloon and boarding house. Despite the rough-and-tumble environment, Lottie carried herself with such poise that she seemed almost immune to the chaos around her, yet Victorian society still denied her full social acceptance because she was known to be a prostitute and professional gambler. She was romantically linked to gambler Frank Thurmond, who operated under the alias Mike Fogarty and sometimes worked as a bartender at the Beehive. Doc checked into the Occidental Hotel, owned by Hank Smith and managed by his wife Elizabeth, affectionately known as Aunt Hank. On September 14th, he opened an account at Smith's Bar. Within a week, his liquor tab had skyrocketed to $120, while his room and meals cost just over $20. A clear sign of where his priorities now lay. Local legend tells of a memorable poker game at the Beehive. Doc had just won a substantial sum and the entire gambling layout from Mike Fogarty. Lottie, who was acting as Fogarty's lookout, asked for a chance to win back the losses. Holliday agreed. The stakes were high, and when the game resumed with a $50 limit, Lottie reportedly won every bet, leaving Doc temporarily broke. True to form, he bounced back the very next night, winning $500 and a diamond ring from an Army officer stationed at the fort. Another story, likely embellished over time, claimed that Kate Elder grew jealous of Lottie's success and beauty. In one version, Kate accused Lottie of trying to steal her man. Insults flew, guns were drawn, and bloodshed was only averted when Doc stepped between the two women and calmed the situation. As the cattle season ended in late 1877, the town grew quieter. Doc and Kate soon left Fort Griffin and began traveling a southwest circuit through Texas, Laredo, then Eagle Pass, where they stayed at the National Hotel and gambled at Blue Vivian Saloon. In Eagle Pass, Doc reportedly crossed the Rio Grande regularly to practice dentistry at the Mexican Army post in Piedras Negras. They remained there for several months. Tension eventually rose when Mexican authorities refused to extradite a man wanted for murdering a blind man on the Texas side of the river. From Eagle Pass, they moved to San Antonio, then Brackettville, near Fort Clark, Jacksboro, and eventually circled back toward Griffin. Wyatt Earp later claimed he first met Doc during the winter of 1877 to 78, either at Fort Griffin or Fort Clark. The most famous story from this period involves a poker game with a man named Ed Bailey. Bailey was caught cheating with the deadwood discards. Doc warned him several times to play poker. When Bailey persisted, Doc pulled in the pot without showing his hand. Bailey went for his gun. In a lightning move, Doc drew a knife from his breast pocket and slashed Bailey just below the brisket. According to Earp, Doc was arrested and locked in a hotel room while a mob gathered outside. Kate allegedly set fire to a shed to create a distraction, then marched in at gunpoint, disarmed the guard, tossed Doc a pistol, and helped him escape. They supposedly rode 400 miles to Dodge City. Kate fiercely denied the entire tale, calling it an implausible fairy story. No court records of the event have been found. It may have happened in Fort Griffin or possibly in another rough town like Brackett, which had a notorious reputation for nightly violence. Whatever the exact details, the story captures the kind of knife and gun violence that had become routine in Doc's life on the gambling circuit. By the spring of 1878, Doc and Kate left Texas for good. They traveled north along the wagon road through Sweetwater and on to Dodge City, Kansas. Texas had forged him. The ambitious young Southern dentist with bright prospects was gone forever. In his place rode a consumptive gambler and gunman, lungs burning, knife and derringer always close at hand, the ghosts of Georgia, Mattie, and the Withlacoochee never far behind. The White Plague whispered constantly. Saloons and cards sustained him. Ahead lay legend.
The story of John Henry Holliday's early years in the West is not one of triumph. It's one of unraveling. A young man trained for gentility and respectability found himself drifting through saloons, gambling halls, and frontier towns where the rules were written in whiskey and gun smoke. Dallas, Denison, Fort Griffin, each stop pulled him further from the life he once imagined and deeper into the rough world that would eventually make him famous. But even in the chaos, something was forming. The dentist's hands grew steadier at the faro table. His nerves hardened in the face of danger. His name, Doc Holliday, began to carry weight in places where men lived fast and died faster. The West was shaping him, tempering him, preparing him for the violent crossroads still ahead. If this episode brought Doc Holliday's early world into focus, sharing it through a rating, a review, or a word to someone who would enjoy it helps keep these stories breathing. In our next episode, we follow Doc into the high plains and cattle towns of the frontier, places where legends were minted, friendships forged, and reputations tested. It's here that he'll cross paths with the men who will define his destiny, including a certain lawman from Missouri. Join us next time for Episode 3 of Lungslinger, the Doc Holliday Odyssey, only on Chronicles of the Old West.